The rain battered the windows of my Seattle townhouse, a relentless drumbeat that mirrored the chaos in my head. I was 28, single, and staring at a laptop screen filled with code that refused to cooperate, my latest freelance project teetering on the edge of disaster. Then I heard it, a crash from next door, sharp and jarring, like glass shattering against a life already in pieces. I bolted upright, heart pounding. My neighbor, Elias Thornton, had been a ghost since his divorce 6 months ago. The man who once waved cheerfully while mowing his lawn now hid behind drawn curtains, his world reduced to silence and shadows. I grabbed my jacket, the instinct to check on him overriding my hesitation. The rain soaked me as I crossed the narrow strip of grass between our homes, my sneakers squelching in the mud. His front door was ajar, a sliver of warm light spilling onto the porch. I knocked, but the only answer was the storm's howl. Pushing the door open, I stepped inside. Elias. My voice echoed in the dim foyer. The air smelled of old coffee and something sharper. Whiskey, maybe. A shattered vase lay in pieces across the hardwood, water pooling around wilted flowers. I found him in the living room, slumped on the couch, his silver-streaked hair disheveled, a half-empty bottle on the coffee table. Elias Thornton, 59, once a celebrated architect, now looked like a man who'd lost more than just his marriage. Logan. His voice was rough, his deep blue eyes flickering with surprise and shame. What are you doing here? I heard the crash. Thought you might be hurt. I stayed by the doorway, unsure of my place in this wreck of a moment. He laughed, a hollow sound. Hurt? I've been hurt for years. This, he gestured at the bottle, the broken vase, is just the aftermath. I should have left. I had my own problems, deadlines, bills, a heart still bruised from a breakup that felt like a lifetime ago. But something in his eyes, raw and unguarded, held me there. I crossed the room, picked up the bottle, and set it out of reach. Let's clean this up, I said, my tone firmer than I felt. He watched me, silent, as I swept up the glass and mopped the floor. It was strange, moving through his space. Bookshelves lined with architectural journals, a faded photo of a younger Elias with his ex-wife, their smiles frozen in a happier time. When I finished, I sat across from him, the weight of his gaze heavier than the rain outside. Why are you doing this? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Because you're my neighbor, I said, shrugging. And you look like you could use a friend. He stared at me, his expression unreadable, then nodded slowly. I don't deserve it, Logan. But thank you. That night, I didn't sleep. My mind kept replaying the way Elias had looked at me, not just with gratitude, but with something deeper, something that stirred a part of me I'd buried long ago. I was no stranger to attraction. I'd known I was gay since I was 16, navigating the world with a quiet confidence in who I was. But Elias? He was 59, straight as far as I knew, and carrying a lifetime of baggage. Yet there was a pull, undeniable, like a current dragging me toward uncharted waters. The next morning, I found a note slipped under my door. In neat, deliberate handwriting, it read, "Coffee at mine? 10 a.m. I owe you. Elias." I stared at it, my pulse quickening. This was just coffee, I told myself. Just a neighbor being polite. But as I pulled on a clean shirt and headed next door, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. Elias's house was different in daylight, less haunted, but still heavy with the ghosts of his past. He greeted me at the door, looking more put together in a navy sweater that hugged his lean frame, his silver hair combed back. "I cleaned up," he said, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Didn't want you thinking I'm a complete disaster." "Too late," I teased, stepping inside. The kitchen smelled of fresh coffee, and sunlight streamed through the windows, softening the edges of the room. We sat at his small table, mugs warming our hands, and for the first time, I saw Elias as more than the broken man from last night. He was handsome, not in the polished way of magazine models, but in a lived-in, rugged way, his features carved by time and experience. We talked about nothing and everything, my coding projects, his old designs, the way Seattle's rain never seemed to stop. He told me about his divorce, not with anger, but with a quiet grief that made my chest ache. His wife, Clara, had left him for someone younger, someone who didn't carry the weight of 30 years of mistakes, he said. I wanted to ask what those mistakes were, but his eyes told me to wait. As the conversation lulled, He reached for the coffee pot, his hand brushing mine. It was brief, accidental, but the warmth of his touch lingered like a spark. Our eyes met, and for a moment, the world stopped. The rain, the ticking clock, the boundaries I'd drawn around my heart. Neither of us moved, the air thick with something unspoken. "I'm sorry," he said quickly, pulling back. "I didn't mean." "It's okay." I cut in, my voice steadier than I felt. But it wasn't okay. That touch had shifted something inside me, a fault line cracking open. I didn't know what it meant, but I knew I wanted to find out. Over the next week, Elias became a constant in my life. It started small, shared coffee, quick chats about the neighborhood, me helping him sort through boxes of old blueprints he'd neglected since the divorce. Each moment felt like a step closer to something I couldn't name. I told myself I was just being a good neighbor, but the truth was harder to ignore. I was drawn to him, to the way his voice softened when he spoke about his past, to the way his eyes lit up when he laughed. Seattle's autumn deepened, leaves falling in fiery heaps across our street. One evening, Elias invited me over for dinner. "Nothing fancy," he warned, but when I arrived, the smell of roasted vegetables and grilled salmon filled his kitchen. He'd set the table with care, candles flickering between us, and I couldn't help but notice how the light caught the silver in his hair, making him look almost ethereal. "You didn't have to go all out," I said, sitting across from him. "I wanted to," he replied, his gaze steady. "You've done more for me than you know, Logan." Dinner was easy, comfortable, but charged with an undercurrent I couldn't shake. We talked about our lives, my chaotic freelance gigs, his years designing buildings that shaped Seattle's skyline. He spoke of his daughter, Mia, who lived in New York and rarely called. "She blames me for the divorce," he admitted, his voice heavy. "Says I was never there, even when I was." I wanted to reach for him, to tell him he wasn't the failure he thought he was, but I held back. Instead, I shared my own scars, my ex, Ryan, who'd left me for someone less complicated, as he put it. Elias listened, his attention unwavering, and when I finished, he leaned forward, his hand inches from mine. "You deserve better than that," he said softly. "Someone who sees you." My breath caught. The words were simple, but they hit like a wave, stirring something deep and dangerous. I changed the subject, afraid of where the moment might lead. After dinner, we moved to the living room, a record player spinning old jazz. Elias stood by the window, staring at the rain-slicked street. "I used to love this city," he said. "Now it just feels like a reminder of everything I've lost." I joined him, standing close enough to feel the warmth of his presence. "You haven't lost everything," I said. "You're still here. That's something." He turned to me, his eyes searching mine. "Why do you care, Logan? I'm just an old man with too many regrets." "You're not just anything," I said, my voice fierce. "You're Elias, and I see you." The words hung between us, raw and unguarded. His hand twitched, as if he wanted to reach out, but he didn't. Instead, he smiled, a small, sad smile that broke my heart. "You're too good for this world," he murmured. I left his house that night with my pulse racing, my thoughts a tangle of want and fear. Elias was 59, straight, and still healing from a broken marriage. I was 28, gay, and falling for someone I shouldn't. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw that moment by the window, felt the weight of his gaze, and wondered what it would be like to cross that line. The next day, I found an excuse to see him again. His garage was a mess, he'd mentioned, so I offered to help organize it. We spent hours sorting through dusty boxes, old tools, faded photos, a life packed away. At one point, our hands brushed again, this time over a stack of blueprints. Neither of us pulled away. His fingers lingered, warm and steady, and when I looked up, his eyes were on me, intense and unguarded. "Logan," he said, his voice low, "what are we doing?" I didn't have an answer. All I knew was that my heart was pounding, and the space between us felt like it could ignite. Before I could speak, his phone rang, shattering the moment. It was Mia, his daughter, and the call pulled him back to a reality where I didn't belong. As he stepped away to answer, I felt a pang of doubt. Was I reading too much into this? Was I chasing something that could never be? But then I remembered the way his hand felt against mine, the way his eyes held mine, and I knew I couldn't walk away. Not yet. The call from Mia changed something in Elias. He grew quieter, more distant, as if her voice had dragged him back to a past he couldn't escape. Over the next few days, I saw less of him. His curtains stayed drawn, his porch light off. I told myself he needed space, but the silence gnawed at me, a reminder of how fragile this connection was. One rainy afternoon, I couldn't take it anymore. I knocked on his door, my heart in my throat. He answered, looking tired but still devastatingly handsome, his navy sweater slightly rumpled. "Logan," he said, surprised. "I didn't expect you." "You've been hiding," I said, half teasing, half serious. "Thought I'd check if you're still alive." He let me in, and we sat in his kitchen, the silence heavy. Finally, he spoke. "Mia's coming to visit next week. She wants to talk about everything. The divorce, the years I wasn't there. I don't know if I'm ready." I leaned forward, my voice gentle. "You don't have to do it alone. I'm here." His eyes met mine, and for a moment, I thought he'd say something that would bridge the gap between us. But he just nodded, his expression unreadable. "You're too kind, Logan. I don't know what I did to deserve you." The words hit harder than they should have. I wanted to tell him he deserved more than he thought, that he deserved to be seen, to be loved. But I held back, afraid of pushing too far. That evening, he asked me to stay for a movie. We sat on his couch, a bowl of popcorn between us, the screen flickering with some old romance film neither of us paid much attention to. Halfway through, his hand brushed mine again, this time deliberate. My breath hitched, and when I looked at him, his eyes were on me, not the screen. "Logan," he said, his voice barely audible, "I don't know what this is, but I feel it." My heart stopped. "Feel what?" He hesitated, his fingers tightening around mine. "You. This. It's different. I've never." He stopped, shaking his head. "I'm too old for this. Too broken." "You're not broken," I said fiercely. "And you're not too old to feel something real." He looked at me, his eyes raw with vulnerability. Slowly, he leaned closer, his breath warm against my skin. For a moment, I thought he might kiss me. But then he pulled back, his hand slipping from mine. "I need time," he whispered. It's a lot." I nodded, my chest tight. "Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere." But as I left his house, doubt crept in. Elias was wrestling with a lifetime of expectations. His marriage, his daughter, a world that told him who he was supposed to be. I was just a neighbor, a friend, maybe something more. But what if that wasn't enough? The next day, I threw myself into work, trying to drown out the ache in my chest. But every line of code felt like a distraction from the truth. I was falling for Elias, hard and fast, and it terrified me. I'd been hurt before, left behind by someone who couldn't handle the real me. What if Elias was just another heartbreak waiting to happen? When Mia arrived, the neighborhood felt different, like the air itself was holding its breath. I saw her through Elias's window, a tall woman in her late 20s, with his blue eyes and a guarded expression. I didn't know what their reunion would mean for him, for us, but I knew it would change everything. That night, Elias texted me, "Can we talk tomorrow? Need to clear my head." My heart raced as I typed back, "Anytime. I'm here." But as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were standing on the edge of something. Something beautiful, something dangerous, something that could break us both. Mia's visit stretched into days, and Elias's house became a fortress of family tension. I kept my distance, giving him space, but the silence between us felt like a wound. Every night, I'd glance at his window, hoping for a sign, a light, a shadow, anything to tell me he was okay. But the curtains stayed closed, and my texts went unanswered. One evening, I saw Mia leave, her face stormy as she climbed into a rental car. Minutes later, Elias knocked on my door. He looked exhausted, his silver hair mussed, his eyes red-rimmed. "Can I come in?" he asked, his voice raw. I led him to my living room, where we sat on my worn-out couch. "Mia's gone," he said, staring at the floor. We talked. Yelled mostly. "She thinks I'm a failure as a father. Maybe she's right." "She's not," I said, my voice firm. "You're trying, Elias. That's more than a lot of people do." He looked at me, his eyes searching. "Why do you believe in me, Logan? I've given you every reason to walk away." I took a deep breath, the words spilling out before I could stop them. "Because I see you. Not the architect, not the ex-husband, not the father who made mistakes. Just you. And I stopped, my heart pounding. "I care about you." The silence that followed was deafening. Then, slowly, he reached for my hand, his fingers warm and steady. "I care about you too," he said, his voice breaking. But I'm scared. I've never felt this before. Not like this. My pulse raced. Felt what? He swallowed, his grip tightening. This pull. Toward you. It's not just friendship, Logan. It's more. And it terrifies me. I leaned closer, my voice soft. It scares me too. But I'm not running. For a moment, we just sat there, hands clasped, the weight of our confession filling the room. Then he leaned in, his lips brushing mine. A tentative, trembling kiss that felt like the start of something unstoppable. When we pulled apart, his eyes were wide, like he'd just discovered a part of himself he didn't know existed. I'm 59, he whispered. I'm not supposed to feel like this. Age doesn't get to decide that, I said, my voice steady. You do. We kissed again, slower this time, the world falling away until it was just us. Two men, flawed and searching, finding something real in each other. But as we pulled apart, reality crept back in. Elias's life was a tangle of guilt and obligation, and I was still figuring out my own. Could this really work? The next morning, Elias was quieter, but there was a new lightness to him, like a weight had lifted. We spent the day together, walking through a nearby park, the autumn leaves crunching under our feet. He told me about his past, not just the divorce, but the years he'd spent denying parts of himself, burying feelings he didn't understand. I thought I was straight, he said, his voice low. But maybe I was just afraid. I took his hand, squeezing it gently. You don't have to be afraid anymore. But fear has a way of lingering. That night, Elias got a call from Clara, his ex-wife. I didn't hear the conversation, but when he hung up, his face was pale. She wants to meet, he said. Says she's been thinking about us. About trying again. My stomach dropped. What did you tell her? I said I'd think about it. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Logan, I don't know what I'm doing. I owe her so much, 30 years of family. But you. I swallowed the hurt, forcing a smile. You don't owe anyone your happiness, Elias. Not her, not Mia, not me. Just figure out what you want. As he left, I felt the ground shift beneath me. I'd opened my heart to a man who might not be ready to choose me. And yet, I couldn't regret it. Not the touch of his hand, not the kiss, not the way he made me feel alive. But the question hung heavy. Would he choose himself, or would he slip back into the life he'd always known? The days after Elias's call from Clara were a blur of uncertainty. He withdrew again, his texts short and vague, his house dark. I tried to focus on work, but every line of code felt like a reminder of the space he'd left behind. I'd fallen for him, hard, and now I was stuck in limbo, waiting for him to choose between a past he couldn't escape and a future he was too afraid to embrace. One evening, I found him in his backyard, sitting on a wooden bench, staring at the stars. The air was crisp, the scent of pine and damp earth heavy around us. I sat beside him, leaving a careful distance. You've been quiet, I said softly. He sighed, his breath visible in the cold. Clara came by yesterday. She wants to try counseling, see if we can fix things. She says she still loves me. My heart sank, but I kept my voice steady. What do you want, Elias? He turned to me, his eyes glistening. I don't know. I loved her once, Logan. But you've made me feel things I didn't think were possible. Not at my age, not after everything. I reached for his hand, my fingers brushing his. You don't have to decide tonight. But whatever you choose, it has to be for you. Not for her, not for Mia, not for what anyone expects. He squeezed my hand, his touch warm and grounding. You make it sound so simple. It's not, I admitted. But it's worth it. We sat there, hands clasped, the night stretching out around us. For the first time, I felt like we were equals, not a broken man and his neighbor, but two people navigating the messy, beautiful chaos of love. When he leaned his head against my shoulder, I didn't pull away. I let the moment linger, memorizing the weight of him, the sound of his breathing. The next day, Elias invited me to a local art gallery, a place he used to visit with Clara. I want to make new memories, he said, his voice tentative but hopeful. We wandered through the exhibits, our shoulders brushing, our laughter filling the quiet spaces. He pointed out paintings he loved, explaining their lines and colors with the passion of the architect he used to be. I saw him come alive, and it made my chest ache with possibility. But the shadow of Clara lingered. That night, over dinner at my place, Elias told me she'd called again, pressing for an answer. I told her I need time, he said, his eyes on his plate. But she's not making it easy. I reached across the table, my hand covering his. You don't owe her an answer, Elias. You owe yourself the truth. He looked at me, his expression torn. The truth is, I'm falling for you. But I'm scared of what that means. For me, for Mia, for everything I've known. My heart raced, but I kept my voice calm. Then let's figure it out together. No pressure, no rush. Just us. He nodded, a small smile breaking through. Just us. That night, we kissed again, deeper this time, our hands exploring the edges of something new. It wasn't just desire, it was trust, vulnerability, a promise to face the fear together. But as I lay awake later, his head on my chest, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was fragile, that Clara's pull could still tear him away. The next morning, Elias got a text from Mia. She was coming back to Seattle, wanting to see him again. She's trying to understand, he said, his voice hopeful but uncertain. Maybe this time, we can actually talk. I smiled, hiding the knot in my stomach. That's good. She's your daughter. She matters. But as he left to prepare for her visit, I felt the weight of what was coming. Elias was at a crossroads, his past, his family, his identity, all colliding. And I was part of that collision, a man who loved him but couldn't control where his heart would land. Mia's return brought a storm of emotions. Elias spent days with her, their conversations spilling into late nights. I stayed away, giving them space, but the distance felt like a chasm. I busied myself with work, but every quiet moment brought his face to mind. The way his eyes softened when he looked at me, the way his hand felt in mine. One evening, Elias showed up at my door, his expression a mix of exhaustion and clarity. Mia and I talked, he said, stepping inside. Really talked. She's angry, but she's trying to understand. And I told her about you. My heart stopped. About me? He nodded, his eyes steady. I told her I'm falling for someone. That it's complicated, but it's real. She didn't take it well at first, but she listened. That's more than I expected. I stepped closer, my voice soft. What does this mean for you? He took my hands, his grip firm. It means I'm done hiding. From Mia, from Clara, from myself. I've spent my life doing what I thought I was supposed to do. But you make me want to be honest, Logan. To be me. Tears stung my eyes, but I smiled. And who are you, Elias? He laughed, a sound full of relief and wonder. I'm a 59-year-old man who's falling in love with a 28-year-old coder. And for the first time, I'm not ashamed of it. We kissed, the kind of kiss that felt like a beginning, a promise. It wasn't perfect. There were still questions, still fears, but it was ours. When we pulled apart, he rested his forehead against mine, his breath warm. I told Clara I can't go back, he said. Not when I've found this. Over the next weeks, Elias and I built something new. We took it slow, navigating the complexities of his past and my present. Mia came around, slowly, her visits marked by cautious questions and tentative acceptance. Clara faded into the background, her calls unanswered, her hold on Elias loosening with every day he chose himself. One crisp November evening, we sat in his backyard, the same bench where we'd shared that quiet moment under the stars. The air was cold, but his hand in mine was warm, grounding. I never thought I'd get here, he said, his voice soft. A year ago, I was drowning. Now I'm alive. I squeezed his hand, my heart full. You saved yourself, Elias. I just held your hand through it. He smiled, his eyes bright. You did more than that. You showed me I could start over. We sat there, wrapped in each other and the quiet beauty of a life reclaimed. The road ahead wasn't easy. Mia's trust would take time, and the world would have its judgments. But as I looked at Elias, his silver hair catching the moonlight, I knew we'd face it together. Love doesn't erase the past, but it can rewrite the future. For Elias, it meant embracing a truth he'd buried for decades. For me, it meant finding a home in someone I never expected. And for both of us, it meant choosing courage over fear, love over doubt, and each other over everything else.